Hi, this is Ash with Spark 59. A number of you probably know me as the author of Running Lean, but by way of introduction, I'd like to say that I'm first and foremost an entrepreneur. I love entrepreneurs, so I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is the sad reality. Most startups fail, most products in general fail. The more interesting statistic, though, is that the companies that succeed report having drastically changing their plans along the way. So what that tells us is that what separates successful entrepreneurs from those that don't quite make it is not necessarily starting with that perfect plan A or that perfect vision, but finding a plan that works before running out of resources. That last part is really key. Today, though, I'd like to focus on what it means to get to that plan that works. In other words, what it means to get to product market fit and how you might navigate your way to get there. So let's start with the definition. Even though Mark Andreessen didn't coin the term product market fit, he helped popularize the term in a blog post where he described what product market fit felt like. Customers buying and using your product faster than you can keep up. In other words, this is when the hockey stick curve begins to take off. The problem with this definition is that while it tells you what product market fit feels like, it doesn't tell you how to get there. As a result, getting to product market fit is often seen more as a black art or a function of luck, but there is a lot more science to it. You can navigate the path to product market fit systematically, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. This talk is going to be organized around 3 learning milestones or stages, and we're going to walk through each one. The first stage is problem-solution fit. Before you get caught up in building and optimizing your product, you can take a number of steps to maximize your odds of building a successful product. The fundamental question to ask yourself at this stage is whether you have a problem worth solving in the first place. The way you do this is by first documenting your plan A or initial vision. You have to draw a line in the sand. The reason this is important is because as entrepreneurs, we are especially gifted at creating reality distortion fields around ourselves and rationalizing anything, good or bad, to fit what we believe. While passion and determination are important, left unchecked, they can lead to blind faith. A lean startup is rooted in the scientific method where we strive to replace blind faith with facts and take a more empirical approach. Traditionally, business plans have been used for this purpose, for documenting our most critical assumptions. In a room full of people, I often ask the question how many people have written a business plan before, and a number of hands go up. I then ask how many people enjoy that process, and most, not all, but most of the hands go back down. Writing a business plan is a good exercise for the entrepreneur. The problem is that the people who make you write it, typically investors, they themselves don't take the time to read the entire business plan. Instead, they ask for the one-page executive summary or the 10-page slide deck or the 30-second elevator pitch. If you're going to have to shorten it to such a concise form, why don't you start with something like that in the first place? Especially since the business plan is going to change anyways over time. Remember that most startups end up drastically changing their initial vision anyways. So why start with something that's going to take a lot of time to write? The business model in comparison is a single diagram that captures your most critical assumptions around your business on a single one-page document, and it looks something like this. This is the lean canvas format that I created, which is a derivative work off of the original business model canvas created by Alex Osterwalder. For those of you that have written business plans before, you will recognize a lot of these building blocks on the canvas. Things like problem, solution, unfair advantage, these are typically what would go on your business plan, except you're not writing 60-page document to capture those things. Instead, you're putting it on a single page. It makes the document a lot more portable, a lot quicker to create, and most importantly, it creates an opportunity to have conversations with people other than yourself. Whether these are internal team members, your advisors, your investors, to me, that is the key aspect of writing a business model, to be able to share it with other people and use that conversation to be able to identify what's riskiest in your business model. This is what the original business model canvas looked like. I changed some of these boxes for my own purposes to make them a lot more actionable. I'm not going to go into each of these boxes in any detail. If you're interested in what these changes were and why I made those changes, you can read a blog post that I wrote several months ago on the topic. A key takeaway, though, that I do want to highlight is that as entrepreneurs, we are most passionate about the solution box, something I like to call awesome. Sometimes that awesome is truly awesome for a lot of people, but most of the times it's not. Most products fail not because we fail to build what we set out to build, but because we fail to find the right customers and markets for those products. In other words, all the other stuff that's on the canvas. When entrepreneurs look at the canvas, this is usually what they see. They just see the solution and that's what they're in love with. But the solution is not the true product of your startup. It's getting all these other pieces to fit together and work together. Getting to product market fit is like putting a giant jigsaw puzzle together and making it all work at the end. While it's important to have a big vision, a vision by itself is not enough. The next step is creating an implementation strategy or rollout plan that outlines how you intend to realize your vision. When entrepreneurs get hit by an idea, that idea comes in as a singular signal, but we can decompose it into its component, vision, strategy, and product components. The mistake most entrepreneurs make is that they rush up this pyramid and fall in love with their product. But vision and strategy are foundational pieces and they have to be solid first before you can build your product. Facebook didn't win on vision but on strategy. They weren't the first social network, and all the existing social networks had the same vision of becoming the largest social network on the planet. Facebook also didn't have any inherent unfair advantages on day one. Their competitors were better funded and had much larger networks than Facebook. The reason Facebook won is because they've rolled out their social network very differently. Instead of publicly launching their service and creating a brand new social network like their competitors did, where to them size mattered above everything else, Facebook instead focused on removing engagement friction out of pre-existing social networks like the ones found on college campuses. They also used a number of tactics like staged rollouts and targeting Ivy League schools, which created scarcity and desire. I'd argue that all of these things are what led to Facebook eventually creating the largest social network that we know of today. Next, you need to hone in on your early adopters. While we would all like to build a product like Facebook that is used by practically everyone on the planet, even Facebook started with a very specific early adopter, a college student, and not just any college student, but a college student on the Harvard campus. At this stage, it is very important to hone in on your early adopters. These are a subsegment of your customers who need your product the most and are often as visionary as you are. Your entire business model can change by the choice of your early adopters, so make sure you take the time to identify and qualify them well at this stage. Now, those of you that have read Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, you'll be quick to point out that early adopters behave very differently from mainstream customers, and there is this chasm between them that can be hard to cross later. But here's the thing, most of you are at the beginning of this curve. You should be so lucky to have a chasm to cross one day. Also, you can't cross this chasm by trying to leapfrog early adopters, but rather by riding the curve and using the early adopters to build enough momentum to leap over the chasm. The real reason, though, we spend time at this stage identifying and understanding our early adopters is that it is from this understanding of customers and their problems, which is typically done through a number of observation techniques and customer interviewing techniques, that we are best equipped to define and build the first iteration of our solution, or what we normally call the minimum viable product, or MVP. There are a number of definitions of MVP out there. This is the one that I subscribe to. An MVP is not your final solution, but rather the smallest solution you can build that delivers customer value and ideally also captures some of that customer value, which is just a fancy way of saying that if you intend to charge for your product, I believe you should start charging from day one, because pricing is typically one of those riskier components in your business model. With your minimum viable product build, you then enter the second stage, early traction. The key question in this stage is asking the question whether you have built something that enough people want. Now, when you first launch a product, lots of things can and do go wrong. A common tendency here is to rely on collecting lots of data and metrics. But in today's world where we can measure almost anything, we often end up with too much information and get lost in a sea of numbers. Here's typically how it happens. We all have this vision of the perfect dashboard. Here's a picture of Tony Stark, Iron Man, which you may not be able to see that well, but he's in his workshop and he's got this perfect dashboard in front of him. He's waving around his arms and getting all these numbers at his fingertips. This is the vision that we have when we think of building our dashboard, but this is what the reality really looks like. We start out with a few tools, and pretty soon we have got hundreds, if not thousands of numbers to look at, and we get lost in all those numbers. What we need isn't more numbers, but actionable insights from our customers. The first step here is creating a standardized measure of progress. Much like we have financial statements like balance sheets and income statements to measure established companies, we need a set of standard metrics to measure startups. At Spark 59, we standardize our measure of progress around 5 macrometrics, first described and popularized by Dave McClure as Pirate metrics. Even though this model was first applied to software startups, I find that it can be generalized to apply to any kind of business. At its core, it captures the complete customer lifecycle, going from acquiring an unaware visitor all the way down to creating happy, paying, and passionate customers. The goal during this stage is getting enough customers through the complete lifecycle. The focus should be on delivering value first, not growth. If you can't repeatedly deliver value to customers, trying to add more users to the top of the funnel is simply a form of waste. So let's see which metrics qualify as value metrics. Even though you want to measure the complete life cycle, there are 2 metrics that typically stand out as being particularly important. The first low-hanging fruit is activation. If you don't deliver a great first experience, the user will probably leave and not come back. The second key metric is retention, which measures repeated use of your product, which is a strong indicator that you are continually delivering value. I marked revenue here as optional because first, it doesn't apply to all products. For example, multi-sided products that use advertising don't charge their users. And second, it's not as important as retention at this stage. If you're charging for your product, retention and revenue should mirror each other quite well. Since you don't have lots of customers yet, learning at this stage ends up being a lot more qualitative than quantitative. This often makes entrepreneurs nervous because it doesn't seem like the learning is statistically significant. When I tell people they should focus on first getting just 10 customers through the funnel, they often tell me that they are building a product for tens of thousands of customers and don't think 10 customers would be statistically significant as a test. What I tell them is that if they can't even get 10 handpicked customers, typically early adopters, through the funnel, adding more users at the top is not going to change things. Being able to count your customers on your fingertips is actually a gift. At this stage, you don't need any fancy analytics tool. Even though we are building a fancy tool of our own, we use a Trello board to visualize all our early customers like this. Once you've demonstrated your value metrics at small scale, you're now ready to start scaling towards product market fit. The key question here is scalability. The first step here is identifying your key engine of growth. Engine of growth is a term Eric Ries defined in his book, The Lean Startup, where he describes 3 engines that startups use to create sustainable growth. Let's see how they map out on the customer lifecycle. The first engine of growth is the paid engine of growth. Here you're trying to improve acquisition at the top of the funnel. For this to be sustainable, you have to be able to acquire customers at a cost that is less than the lifetime value of those customers. Typically, you use things like advertising or direct sales force, but even things like social media, which seem like free channels, end up being paid channels because they require a lot of human capital to be able to put them together. The second engine of growth uses the retention trigger. Here we try to improve retention. We try to improve the lifetime value of customers by extending the time with which they use our products. So we make them more sticky, and hence the name. And the final engine of growth is the viral engine of growth. Here we're using the referral trigger to use our happy customers that have gone down the funnel to be able to add more users at the top of the funnel through the referrals that they create. It is possible for more than one of these engines of growth to apply to your startup, but in order to maximize return on your effort, you need to focus on one primary engine of growth at a time. So how do you pick your key engine of growth? Pick the engine of growth that stands to deliver the biggest impact. In the case of Facebook, that ended up being the viral engine of growth. This stage tends to be more quantitative than qualitative, but as you add more customers, it actually becomes increasingly harder to keep your metrics actionable. In the good old early days when you had just a handful of customers, it was easy to correlate observed results to actions because you knew all your customers. But now, not only do you have a lot more customers to track, but you're also continually pushing more features and running a lot more marketing campaigns. And don't forget that other people are doing these things for you now as well. it becomes way harder to derive cause and effect from the various activities and know which ones are really working. When things go well, we always rush to take credit based on what we know just happened, like pushing a feature out. But when things don't go so well, it's usually someone else's fault. The reason this is difficult to do is that the customer lifecycle funnel has a number of long lifecycle events. You can see that here with the blue dots. The people who sign up today are time shifted to when they activate and are further time shifted to when they actually upgrade and pay for your service. This makes it very hard to track what you might do at the sign up stage all the way down through the customer lifecycle. What cohorts essentially do is they help you group your customers and keep these blue dots together. By being able to isolate the complete lifecycle as a cohort, you can more rigorously measure if you're improving your product on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. Another problem with relying on just metrics is that they can tell you what's going wrong, but not why. You can try to guess at what's going wrong and attempt to fix it, but there's an even better way. Building a continuous feedback loop with your customers and having them tell you, which you can use for rapid hypothesis generation on what might be going wrong. Here's a screenshot of how we do this. This is an activation subfunnel from one of our products. On the left-hand side, you can see the subfunnel and the drop-offs across all the steps. Now I can use this to try to guess what might be going wrong, but the right-hand side is where the real action is. This shows me all the people that are going through this funnel. I can not only see the people who successfully complete the funnel, but those that don't. I have their names and their email addresses. I can reach out to them and ask them what might be going wrong. Now at this stage, because we have so many customers, this becomes hard to do manually over time, and so we actually built a way to automate this. This email alone generates 20 to 30 emails a day from our customers that continually keeps us informed on what kinds of issues they're running into. And it allows us to create new features and new ideas, which we then test and measure in just the same way. And the last point I want to make is a big one. The journey to product market fit is going to be riddled with a lot of experiment failures. Now, when experiments fail, many entrepreneurs are quick to run away from that failure and change direction drastically, justifying it as a pivot. Unfortunately, the word pivot has become an excuse and an overly abused lean startup term. A pivot represents a change in strategy and needs to be grounded in learning. If it's not grounded in learning, it's just a disguised see what sticks strategy, which is not an optimal way to get to product market fit. There's a reason that the hockey stick curve is largely flat at the beginning. It's not because the founders were too dumb or not working hard enough, but rather that before you can find a business model that works, you have to go through a lot of stuff that doesn't. The answer isn't running away from failed experiments, but rather digging deeper. Taking the time to uncover the root cause of these failures is where you'll find the real breakthrough insights. I hope you found this talk helpful. If you'd like to receive more content like this, consider joining the Running Lean Mastery newsletter, which is linked on this page. Until next time, thanks.